All right. There's Kevin from the
Hey, Matt, I don't know if I can hear you.
Yes.
Oh, yes, I can. Okay, never mind. I thought you said something and then the sound went
Can
away.
you hear me?
Oh, it's
Okay.
not. That's good.
It's not good.
It's like in and out.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Let's see if I can. All right. Let me leave it real quick and then come right back. Maybe that will work.
How's everybody doing?
Doing well.
I see you was getting your hair together, Burl. I did it.
I just saw myself doing that when I looked down
got
on the
mine together
YouTube.
too, a little bit.
It's perfect, Brian.
It is perfect.
Did y'all sign the beam?
Yes,
That was cool.
it was.
Although we didn't get to put a hard hat on Brian. I was kind of bummed about that.
All right. I'm back. Is this better?
Yes, now I can hear. Yep.
I wonder what that was. I did unplug the charger, so maybe that helps. I don't know. No idea. All right. Welcome, everybody. Let's have everybody here.
Yes.
All right. Excellent. Okay. I see Jennifer, Burl, and Brian, and Daphne. All right. Excellent. All right. Let's go ahead and get started. This is the Policy and Governance Committee meeting for July 30th, 2020. In attendance with us, as far as the board is concerned, is Daphne Mooring, Burl Piccolo-Antonio, Brian Hairston, and Jennifer Chrysler. Again, I apologize for my technical difficulties, and if I have any future ones, I'll apologize for them now too. The goal is to get through this agenda so that we can hit our 7:30 special meeting on time. So we'll see how that goes. All right. Let's go ahead and get started. Hopefully all of you have had a chance to review the policies. I do have the agenda here and just the the list. We'll just go straight on down the list and we'll get started. Policy 148. This is a bylaw for public expressions of board members. The only difference between our active one and the Neola one is the fourth paragraph we have in the active one that reads, that is basically the disclaimer language. Everything else is in line with what we already have on our active. And it's also in line with the draft. There's nothing new that they're suggesting. We just added that disclaimer language in the 4th paragraph, basically saying that views that are expressed are those of the members and not necessarily reflect the views of the board or the author's colleagues on the board. Does anybody have any concerns about keeping it as it is?
No, I think the disclaimer should stay there.
I agree with you there. Absolutely. All right, we'll go ahead and keep the disclaimer there. Keep it as is. All right, we'll go ahead and move on to bylaw 148.1. This particular bylaw is exactly the same as our active and the draft are exactly the same. There are no changes to 148.1. Does anybody see any need for a change regarding board staff communications? One of the, and I think this was one that came up fairly recently.
Yeah, I thought we talked about this recently too. And I thought actually we raised some questions about it the last time we talked about it, because I think it's a bylaw that not all school districts have. And I think the concern was, I'm trying to think of how to word this, but I'll just say it. I don't know how accurately the bylaw actually reflects what happens.
Correct.
Right. I agree.
And so if that's the case, I think we either need to talk about what happens and make a change so that it's congruent with the policy, or reconsider whether this bylaw makes sense for our district. And again, I think the last time we talked about it, I don't remember what other districts we looked at, but there were several other districts that don't even have this bylaw.
Yeah, I didn't remember who had it or not, but I just remember that I think I felt like it was in conflict with having a liaison to the school board, to the union. And whether we had that or not, it wasn't necessarily the issue of having the liaison, but it was whether or not we were then making a decision that was in conflict with one of our bylaws.
Yes,
Yeah,
that
I
is when we
agree.
talked about it.
And it specifically had to do with on section C, the second to last sentence, where it covers, it will be considered to be unacceptable conduct for board members to discuss individual personalities, personnel grievances, or other complaints with member of staff. That is what I have as far as my notes are concerned, was the concerning part. If I remember correctly, we were concerned that if we were to enforce the language as it's written here, we would end up limiting our accessibility to staff and other parties to actually being able to communicate with individual members of the board.
Right. And if we have a liaison, I mean, unless we're going to the meetings and all that they're telling us at the meetings is how wonderful everything is, then that would seem that any complaints would fall directly under that, which, who knows, that might be the content.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think the liaison position is in direct conflict with section A, which says that everything goes through the superintendent. So I think the intent of this policy or bylaw must have had some parameters that we aren't living with at this point. And is it relevant to continue to have this?
Yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, there's no reference to the ORC, so that's not even a matter in here. It really is just whether or not how the board should conduct itself within the district.
Yeah, I mean,
Go on.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
So are we talking about eliminating sections of this, or eliminating it altogether, or trying to modify it in a way that would, I mean, we would really have to revamp letter A and C in order to reflect what's actually happening here. I mean, I certainly don't want to create an environment where the board members are circumventing the superintendent to go talk to staff.
Yeah, I would also, I mean, I would say that paragraph A is not one that is followed either. And I mean, that would include, I mean, I could just give an example of, you know, working with the IT director to get meetings set up in a virtual environment, or working with our communications director on a communication. I mean, it's just, I don't believe that this bylaw number one, I don't think it accurately reflects what's going on. And number two, I personally think that following the letter of this bylaw would be very cumbersome. I can't honestly,
Mm-hmm.
I can kind of understand why the bylaw is there, maybe, but I'm not sure how that would actually work in practice to accomplish things that need to get done.
I guess my thought on it is I personally can see how it could exist, and maybe this board doesn't really see that as a practical measure, because I think we have a lot of respect for our teachers and our staff. We have a lot of respect for our superintendent. And I know that specifically, like when we've been approached about things from staff or had to work with staff, we've looped in the administration to make sure that they were aware and there wasn't any like double conversations. I also think there's I have this fear that what we're writing to make sure that we're protecting for future boards and future conversations, that I would never want to also have a policy though that would make it so that there was a reason why the staff, we want to encourage the staff at all levels to work with the superintendent first, right? But at the same time, I want to make sure the staff understands that we serve them as well. And many of them are residents, and many of them are the constituents who did elect us. And so their voice also matters. So, I mean, I would be in favor of rewriting this so that maybe we eliminate the sections that are in direct conflict, but I do think there needs to be some language in here that says that the board will strongly encourage at all times for staff to be communicating, either when there's complaints or concerns or whatever, but somehow making sure that it's clear that our intent is that we want that communication to be strong between the superintendent and the staff.
Yeah, I think the nature of the policy seems to create a bottleneck at the superintendent, and I think for a time that may be appropriate. But I think that with the way we currently function, we're probably in violation of the bylaw. And I agree that it needs, instead of using the word shall, strongly encouraged or strongly recommended is probably more appropriate language. Steve, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think everything you've said, I agree with, that the way our current board functions, it's not an issue. I think it's good if people come to you and there's an issue that maybe I don't see or our team doesn't see, and you bring it to, and that's the spirit with which you've identified things, and we've tried to address them once you have. But I think the fact of the matter is, if there are situations where this can happen as just a matter of course, with or without this policy, right? People could directly communicate with folks. I think the fact that you five work together and you want to hear from our public, you want to hear from our teachers, makes this irrelevant. But I think Jennifer's right. Down the road, this might be a policy that's needed because, maybe there'll be a situation where there's sort of direct dealing with, a staff and circumventing the superintendent. I don't think that's a problem now, but in the future it could be.
So we will go ahead and set this one off to the side and update its language to strongly encourage or strongly recommend instead of shall, and probably pull some of the more specific pieces of Section A and Section C out. And then we'll, so what we'll do, since this is just one that it's been a while since we've reviewed it, we can push this to the third quarter or to the next quarterly policy meeting. Are there any concerns about that? Okay. All right. Let's go on to 149, bylaw 149. This is another one that is exactly the same as our current active. So the draft, the proposed draft, and the policy and the current active policy are exactly the same. There is no change in any of the language. It specifically talks about access to records. Are there any concerns about the way this one is written out for access to records, or if we run into a situation where a board member wants to have access to records but is denied for some reason? Okay, then I think we'll go ahead and just keep it as active, and we'll just basically date it, renew it as it currently is. Is there any concern about that? Okay. All right. Bylaw 152 having to deal with officers, titled officers. There is one minor difference in the active, our current active versus the draft. In the second line of the active, we have an additional, which I think is appropriate. Our current one uses the words "or any other person authorized to administer oaths" in the language when it comes to administering new members to the board, and I'm good with keeping that language as any other person in addition to the treasurer or another board member. Is there any concern about keeping that language the way it is and making no changes? Okay. All right. Bylaw 154 having to deal with motions. There is so our current active policy has basically letters A, B, and C, and M from the draft. So if you look at the draft, letters A, B, C, and M are in our current policy. Letters D through L are not. D through L, basically, I could just kind of run through each one of those here. D is establishing a reasonable method whereby any person may determine the time and place of all regularly scheduled meetings. Determine a fee charged to individuals requesting copies of the scheduled meetings. Designated day for, this is things that we would need to do at the organizational meeting. Designated day for informal work sessions of the board. Adopting existing bylaws and policies for its own operation. Readopt continuing contracts and agreements of the board where continuation is not authorized by law. I is recognize majority bargaining agents. J is join the OSBA. K is adopting a calendar which shall exist for only the administrative convenience of the board and shall not serve to validate or avoid any board action. And L, certify the number of students for purposes of establishing a service fund. We currently only do we only have A, B, C, and M listed. I don't see anything pressing that we would need to add at this point.
Don't we also do J?
Would-
I was going to say, so it doesn't prevent us, even if we left it written the way it was. I think we do, Daphne, do, is J the OSBA one?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think the way that it's written, it doesn't prevent us from doing any of those other ones. It just means that it wouldn't require a board to do all of those things at their organizational meeting. I guess I don't have a strong feeling either way. We do definitely do J. And I think we may also do there was a C. Oh, but that is part of our current one,
Season.
right?
Mhm.
I thought there was another one I saw that we,
Is that the, are you probably referring to the calendar in K? No?
no. Maybe it was just J.
Matt, did you say B is included?
Yes, A, B, C, and M. So D through L are
Oh.
not on our current active one.
It was D. I think we do D. It's just not in the current one, correct?
I think we do D and not B myself.
So interesting you bring that up. Yes, B is in our current one, but I don't know that we've ever designated a newspaper in any meeting I've ever been in. I don't know that we've ever published a notice. How long has it been since we've published notices in newspapers?
Okay.
We do actually publish. So the notice gets, well, I don't know that we don't control whether they publish it, but our notices of meetings do get sent to the Rocky Fork
To the
newspaper,
media,
and I
yes.
think the Dispatch as well.
Right, it does.
Every notice.
Yes.
But we do not designate them in B. And under the language of this current bylaw, we shall designate a newspaper or newspapers. I don't have RC 7.2 and 7.12 in front of me. But are we saying that maybe we remove B?
Well, with the RC reference, maybe we can't.
Yeah, I would not necessarily remove it. I would just choose the one or two papers that we would want to designate.
Organizational meeting.
Addresses the qualifications of a newspaper for publishing legal notices. It is not a reference to school board requirements in the ORC. But if we want to go ahead and keep it, that's fine. But for the upcoming organizational, we may want to designate a couple newspapers in the minutes on the agenda. Is that probably the way you read it, Burl?
Sorry, I was on mute and I didn't realize it. Yeah, I mean, I think if we leave it the way it is, then at the organizational meeting, that has to be an item on the agenda.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know that, I mean, I'd have to pull up the revised code section, but I would be surprised if the revised code section requires that we do that.
It does not. It just basically describes what a qualification for a newspaper would be.
Yeah.
So it's in reference to any state agency or political subdivision when deciding on a newspaper. So I don't feel strongly about adding J onto the bylaw. So you leave it to future boards to decide whether OSBA is the way for them to do. I know it's kind of been our thing. Is there a competitive organization out there?
No, there's not.
It's the only one in town. And so,
Yes.
so it's either join or don't join. Basically.
Yeah. I mean, personally, I can't imagine how a public school board in Ohio would not be a member of the OSBA. So I mean, I guess I just can't. There one?
Yeah, there was.
Yeah.
I don't know if they've since joined, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be an interesting, I'm not sure why you wouldn't want to be part of an organization that, I understand that people may have different feelings about their interactions maybe with OSBA, but I can't imagine not being part of the state consortium of school boards.
The only qualm I can see, right? The only qualm I can see is in regard to the fees. If someone really wanted to reduce budget, was concerned about expenses, the fees might become a topic of discussion. They're small, but they are a fee. So I can see that. Do you guys would you like to add J to the bylaw or leave the current bylaw as it is?
So I would add it, but again, if that's not the consensus of the group, I mean, I am also okay with having it be up to each new board to make that decision.
Who are the two board members that are the official members of this committee? Matt and?
Oh, of this particular committee? That'd be me and Jennifer and I. Yeah.
Okay.
Jennifer, do you have any strong feelings about that?
Sorry, I couldn't unmute. I don't have any strong feelings about it. I guess I can't think of a reason why we wouldn't join. And so maybe I don't know. I guess I don't have any strong feelings. I don't know why it's a topic of, like, I don't remember us talking about that before. I just remember us appointing the person who's gonna, don't we have to appoint somebody? So like, I guess maybe instead of joining, can't we just say appoint the representative to the Ohio School Board Association?
No, I think in the organizational meeting, there is a approval of joining.
Oh,
January.
okay.
And then later, you're right, later we then appoint the delegate
Okay.
and an alternate.
I don't have any issues adding it.
Yeah, I don't have any issues just leaving it as is and leave it up to whatever future boards or whatever to decide, within, if it presents itself at that time versus us having to make a decision today.
Yeah, my concern, I don't want to back any future boards into a decision. And if there's a future board that doesn't know that they should join the OSBA, I would hope someone would probably let them know. For now, I'm going to probably lean towards leaving it off and just keeping the policy as is. Are there any concerns about that?
No.
Okay. All right. Let me go ahead and mark that. Let's move on to bylaw 155 regarding committees. This one is very different. Our current committees bylaw states that the ad hoc committees can be created basically by the president of the board. The one that Neola is presenting here really gets specific about number of members, whether someone can request to be appointed to a committee, what to do if they refuse to join a committee once appointed. really the part that we have is just the ad hoc committees may be created and changed at any time by the president, and shall serve until the committee is discharged. Anybody have a concern about keeping the one we have in place?
I just had a question about the committees where I know there was one where they were wanting us to participate at the same time. There was actually a fee that was associated with our participation. I think with arts or something going on. And I didn't know if this is in any way going to address what we can and cannot be a part of.
I don't know that this particular bylaw, this more has to deal with whether, rather than listing the committees we can join or create, this is how to create them. And I think you're referring to the Gehenna Arts Council.
Right. I'm just saying as far as participation, not because this is it basically saying that it's committees that we establish, or is it does it differentiate between ones that we establish and one that we participate in? But just like the Parks and Rec, which that committee or the insurance committee and things like that.
I think the purpose of this bylaw is for committees of the board, not participation in another organization's committee. And I think our current one, right, is the short one that was pretty nebulous because until 2016, right, we didn't really have committees of the board. And so it was pretty brief and not used. Given that we do now have committees, perhaps expanding the bylaw would be prudent. I don't know. The president assigned the committee members, and we as a group established the committees. So it seems like we're following what they proposed here with regard to established or standing committees. And then at the bottom, it references the ad hoc committees.
Right.
I could be down for expanding ours. I mean, the first paragraph doesn't give me any heartburn. I wouldn't want to limit the number of people because I think we all will enjoy attending the committee. So I think that's important. Members shall be appointed by the president. I think that kind of happens at the meeting, right? So are you actually appointing us, Burl, or are we just kind of all deciding?
I mean, I am appointing you, but the way that I've always done it is that I've asked for everybody to give input. So
yeah, so maybe it's not, we don't keep the first one. Maybe we keep the second one. I think we can keep the third one because you shouldn't force somebody to serve on the committee. I'm okay with the other one. We do each committee shall be convened by a chairperson who shall report for the committee. We do that.
So it sounds to me like we kind of want to add a little bit of definition to what we have here.
Yeah. I think most of these, other than the regulate, the first one, makes sense.
yeah, I would agree. This is a situation where I think that the recommendations actually reflect what we're doing rather than the other way around. And I mean, I think that structure is probably good for whatever the next configuration of the board is that is making these appointments.
Yeah, I agree. The final one, the president shall appoint at the organizational meeting or as soon after the organizational meeting as practicable. Do you guys have? Probably appointing happens at the organizational meeting because committees start right up in their current structure.
I agree. at the organizational meeting, just make it cleaner. I like this too, because I think people have asked us, what do you have on your committee? Somebody asked me that recently. And I was like, oh, I don't know. And I did look up that policy and there was not a whole lot there. And I was like, oh, it doesn't really talk about it. So it would be nice to have such detail in the policy that we can just give to people if they want to understand what the whole committee structure is about. I like it.
Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and make those changes, and we'll put them up for approval at the next public general board meeting. All right, the next one is policy 161 bylaw. It has to do with parliamentary authority. Our current version, our active policy says where you use the most recent edition of Robert's Rules of Orders. It's pretty straightforward what we have going on right now. Anybody want to make a change? Are there any concerns about changing it? I'm inclined to keep it. Okay, here we go. All right, statement of philosophy. That is, so that's policy 2110. There are a couple differences here. On the active policy, we have an extra section, which is the last paragraph of the active policy, which starts, as for personal opportunity, it's critical that students learn to make effective, rational, responsible, or ethical choices or decisions in how they treat their minds and bodies, how they plan their futures, how they cope with frustrations, and how they solve personal, social, and economic problems. That's in our current policy. The draft does not have that, the proposed draft or the copy from Neola. Instead, what they have is a long section that begins, today there is ample evidence, and goes down, lists A, B, C, and D, and then continues on to discuss in further observations about philosophy, and it's a lot more, many more specifics about what the board would do. I'm inclined to keep what we have going on. Is there any part of the Neola draft that you guys think should be incorporated into our policy?
So I'm going to say something that is, I don't know, maybe it's just something to think about. Because this is a statement of philosophy, I'm really uncomfortable using anything that Neola writes. I think that our statement of philosophy should be something that we work on, that is in our words and that reflects our values. I guess I hadn't really thought about it if we've talked about this before, but I mean, I guess my personal opinion is that this should be something that is personally written by our board.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what I see on that very last paragraph of the statement itself, our current, or of our active one, regarding personal opportunity. The other is almost exact to what Neola has. Are you suggesting maybe we get a workshop together and work on this, Burl, at some point?
That would be my suggestion. Yeah.
I agree.
Okay. Then what I probably suggest we do for this, as far as tonight's concerned, is we keep it as is, and then we put on the agenda maybe for next year or later on this year a time to discuss and hammer out statement of philosophy. Seems like something would be a lot easier to do in person.
I would agree.
So let's go ahead and keep it as is, and then we will keep that on the back burner for future action for updates. Okay. Policy 2111, titled Parent and Family Engagement. The active and the Neola draft are the same. There's additional options that Neola provides, additional blanks to fill in when it comes to relate. But really, reading through this, I found it's very, very broad. It covers. I wasn't able to consider any or think of anything that it did not cover when it comes to parent and family engagement. Is there anything else that anybody else found that you'd like to change or add? Okay, we'll keep it as is.
Given the current distance learning, is there anything that we should be contemplating that should be part of this?
There's section D might have to do with learning at home. I mean, obviously, when section D was written, we're talking about after school,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Right.
and that the support that they get at home rather than distance learning. I just hope we get back to normal as soon as possible, I guess.
Yep.
That's a great question, Daphne. I'm not sure if I need anything. I'm not sure if I want to update this policy or if we were to have a distance learning policy that we could, switch on and off if needed. That might be a more appropriate way to address distance learning specifically. Are there any questions or other questions or concerns on this one?
So are we putting a distance learning policy
So,
at the table?
yes, yes, I think we should, especially once we hit the next policy meeting, which will be October, end of October. If we're still dealing with distance learning at that, well, obviously we are dealing with distance learning at that point also. I think maybe we need to put a policy in place if we don't already have one. Maybe we take a look at what administrative guidelines we have and build the policy based on some of that framework. I'll add that.
When you're doing that, are you adding any kind of like participation from like the teachers and parents and so forth? Are you creating this policy that's going to possibly impact what they do, or are we taking it upon ourselves based on what we are capable of doing, or what?
I think that's up in the air. I'm not sure what boundaries we would have on it. I want it to be as flexible as possible, though. If we run across a Chromebook issue and we have to go to, Blizzard packages, then I'd want to be able to handle it under the same policy of distance learning.
So in August, we're going to have a resolution for remote learning. And so I think we're going to address some of those things. So we're still working on a policy for it, but I think some of that will get addressed, Matt.
Excellent. Good. Any other questions or concerns on this one or on the upcoming distance or remote learning policy that we could discuss in October? Okay, continue on. All right, Policy 2131. This is educational outcome goals. The active and the Neola draft are very different on these two. The verbiage it changes some of the letters, and it's not nice and neat when you compare the two. So if you take a look at the one we're currently using as active, letter A, B, and I are not in the Neola draft. So when it talks about acquiring basic skills, problem solving, thinking critically, or in letter B, taking stock of basic information concerning principles of physical, biological, and social sciences, or letter I, the ability and desire to express himself or herself creatively in one or more of the arts. Those three are Gehenna, active parts of the outcome goals that we have listed, but they're not listed under Neola.
So I'm wondering if the board maybe wants to consider, this is a little, like, I think this is specific to a school district like the philosophy. So it may be something you want to consider doing, when you write the philosophy statement.
I
And
would agree.
we would, our team would love to be a part of that. So it might be a good opportunity.
Yeah,
think
I would
you're
agree. I mean, these are, so this and the philosophy, those are, I mean, you've already done the work, Steve, with the district's vision, mission, and beliefs. I mean, that's what these should be. They should be all in congruent with each other.
Yeah, and then as we, kind of re-engage with the strategic plan, if anything changes, we would update it, and then we could, do both of those.
I agree. Yeah. It is something that we're basically talking about a graduate profile here.
Could be
in a lot of different ways. This is the graduate profile.
Yeah, a lot of districts have addressed it that way. Yep.
And I know we have a graduate profile also, but this is awfully similar to it. So we'll postpone that along with the philosophy.
Okay.
Okay, moving on to policy 2240. This is dealing with controversial issues. Much of the draft that's being recommended is similar to our current active. Some of the differences on the draft include that first sentence: the Board of Education believes the consideration of controversial issues has a legitimate place in the instructional program of schools. That sentence is not in our current active draft. Also, the fifth paragraph down where it says controversial issues related to the program may be initiated by the students themselves, provided they are presented in the ordinary course of classroom instruction and not substantially disruptive to the educational setting. That is not in our current draft either. I'm wondering, as I'm going through, taking a look at some of these changes that are on the Neola, would controversial issues, a policy like this, fall under the umbrella of philosophy and the other one, the educational outcomes? Aren't we entering almost the same kind of scope, or is this a different scope that's something we can handle tonight? And really, it's about dealing with controversial issues. It doesn't define controversial, but there are some minor changes that are here. Whether a student may initiate the discussion of controversial issues or not, that is on here. And let's see here. There are differences about whether or not controversial issues can be discussed in a classroom if they haven't gone through the superintendent already prior.
Isn't this sort of like when the kids wanted to walk out?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess maybe one of the questions I would have back for you, Steve, is that the way I thought that we handled that really well, and I thought that students were able to express their voices and talk about things in a very open way. And it was controversial for a lot of people who, you know, believe they shouldn't have walked out, believe they should, whatever you want to talk, you know, whatever side you were on. But do you think that the policy reflects what the practice was handling that situation? Or do you think additional changes that need to be made to it to help provide guidance for the future?
Yeah, so I think that's a perfect example, Jennifer. And I think, you know, what was amazing is to how the kids responded to that, how our students came to us, you know, and we had a discussion about it, and they wanted it to be safe and they wanted it to be organized. And they, you know, so I think something that reflects, you know, that we want students to be able to voice their opinions. That's part of our vision, our mission, and our beliefs. But we want them to do it in a way that's safe and respectful and in collaboration. So that was a real collaboration, and they walked out on the football field, and we talked about with the SROs whether they should, because I think that first they wanted to go on Hamilton Road, and that would have maybe been dangerous. So at the end of the day, something that reflects a deliberative process with students and administrators and teachers, so that students feel free to do that, they feel supported. And it doesn't mean we take a position on the issue one way or another. It's their First Amendment right to express this as a group. And I think it's healthy. And so I think this is a little dated, maybe. I think we could make it better. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you guys
I would
think?
agree. I agree with what you just said.
Yeah, so the students could have done what they wanted to do without coming to us. But it was just a very nice experience, and even some parents got involved. So that's the kind of thing I think that's transformative, you know?
Yeah, I think the way that it's written, it doesn't align with the values that we have
Yeah,
about student voice. And
yeah,
so I think I think the policy needs some work. And Matt, I think you're asking if you think that work can be done here right now in this committee meeting, or if it's one that needs to be set aside for us to work on. I mean, I think it kind of makes sense to work on in conjunction with those other policies that we've set aside so far tonight.
Yeah,
and
that is what I was asking.
And if that's something the board would like us to work on and then bring to you, we could do that. I mean, I don't know what
I'm also, when it comes to the philosophy and educational outcomes, I think a lot of us would like to be involved in that discussion. But something regarding controversial issues, since you guys have seen how it works behind the scenes, how it worked out well, and how we can edit this particular policy to kind of encourage a similar outcome in future situations.
Yeah. I mean, I think the old one is kind of dated. This one is the newer one is better maybe, but I think personalizing it might be a good.
Yeah, I agree with personalizing it because I understand where, you know, if you're talking about you want to participate in a certain kind of way, but a lot of the things that are taking place that, you know, around the country, you know, it's not planned. So sometimes there's that little gut feeling and there's that little anger and there's that little willingness to say no more or whatever, or stop or whatever the case is. So I don't know how that you can bottle that energy, because to me, that type of energy brings about changes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I don't know how we can sit and set a policy that's going to say we're going to you can be upset about things, but don't be too angry as long as you do it this way. So I don't see how this policy is really doing any good if we're really trying to be that school district that is believing in our missions and our goals and trying to give our students that same type of space to express themselves. So I don't know what this actually does and what a policy will do if we take that position. So
Yeah.
I'm inclined to agree with you guys. I think saying that it needs to be personalized is a good idea. So we will go ahead and also shelf this one for future review. And I think Steve, if you and the administration want to work on some draft for the future policy, I think that'd be a good strong move.
For this one and the others, Matt, or just the
For
controversial?
this particular one to start.
Okay. Yeah.
Because
we can do that.
like I said before, I think that a lot of the board members want, and myself included, would want to be in the room when we're discussing educational outcomes.
Yeah.
Which I think would be a great SLA meeting, by the way, and philosophy. So let's go ahead and keep moving here. Policy 2261.02. Good news is it's exactly the same as the active one. So the draft in the active for Title I, Parents' Right to Know, is exactly the same. The legal codes that are included follow the same, are the same basically. Are there any concerns about keeping it as is? This is one of those we just want to make sure we review regularly. Okay.
The only thing I had a question on that, because it says parents' right to know. Is there any, because looking through that, I didn't see anything when it's talking to students that are 18, 19 years of age. There's no, I don't know if that puts us in any kind of position if a person is 18 or 19 and they are have their own place or whatever the case is. How does that impact the parents' right to know certain things about that student? Because it's just a broad. It doesn't limit it to minor or something of that nature.
I'm not sure, because we're obviously dealing with Title I. I'm not sure how much we would be able to manipulate it or edit the policy itself.
Okay.
Dealing with, how dealing with the Fed is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any thought on that, Steve? Have we run into a situation where parents' right to know on Title I conflicts with the age, the fact that they're not a minor?
I think it has. It comes up more in special education and IEP meetings. So I've never heard of it happening with Title I. But so when a student at the high school turns 18, and if they don't want their parents to be part of an IEP meeting, they can request that they're not a part of it. And so, but I haven't seen it in Title I.
Okay. Any other discussion regarding this particular policy? At this point, we'll keep it as is. Obviously, if the federal government decides to give us different language, we'll have to update accordingly. Okay. Policy 242101. Students as trainees. It is exactly the same as our current one. The draft and the active are the same. It references the U.S. Code and Fair Labor Standards Act. It's exactly the same. Are there any concerns about students as trainees policy?
This is one where the administrative guidelines are probably more important than the policy itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. True. Okay, we'll go ahead and keep it as is.
Yep.
Moving on to 2531, copyrighted works. The only change from Neola that they're suggesting is the fourth paragraph of the draft. It says, which we don't have in the active, this starts, additionally, the agent's name, mailing address, phone number, fax number, and email shall be included on the student handbook for each school. We don't have that in our policy, and at this point, I don't see, it's optional. I don't see a reason to add it.
Yeah.
Is there anybody that disagrees or thinks otherwise? Okay, we'll keep that one as is. Policy 2575, service learning. It is all the same. We check both the co-curricular box and the academic program box of the Gahanna Jefferson School District. It doesn't change. This service learning policy isn't different. Are there any changes that you guys would suggest? Okay, we'll keep that one as is. Policy 3112 is exactly the same as active. This is the board staff communication. This is really similar to the bylaw. And I think we set aside the bylaw to discuss especially that sentence that ends discussing individual personalities, personnel grievances, and other complaints, staff and board. I think we should probably set this one aside for the same reason, for the same review. Is there any concern about doing that? Okay, we'll set that one aside. Policy 4112 has to do with classified. It's the same thing. Set that one aside also. Policy 4170, substance abuse. It's exactly the same as the current active one from Neola, and also includes all the legal citations that are necessary. Any concerns about the substance abuse policy 4170? Okay, we'll keep that one as is. Policy 4242 regarding staff development. Our current policy uses the word may when referring to the superintendent may plan and implement a program, or in the board may reimburse staff members. Those are the two boxes that we've checked. And the only other difference on this one is the very last part of the last sentence, where it says, so a sentence that starts in participation in the program may be voluntary unless considered part of the duties of any participating staff member. We end there. This draft from Neola adds according to provisions in a negotiated, collectively bargained agreement or other contractual arrangement. I'm inclined to add that language. Does anybody feel differently that we should maybe just keep it as is?
Do we have any classified employees that are not part of a union?
We do.
So that muddies that a little bit.
So, you know, kitchen staff, secretarial staff, they're not part of the union.
So Daphne, would you say that adding it muddies it, or leaving it, that fragment out, keeps the policy a little muddy?
I think if there's not a collectively bargained agreement, and it makes it muddy.
Yeah. Have we run into a situation, Steve, where this policy goes in conflict, or there's a complaint that where you have to use this policy as enforcement?
I'm trying to think of one. Yeah, I can't think of. No, I mean, I don't know. I don't think we need to add it.
Okay.
Are there any duties that actually cross over where you have like union and then non-union personnel doing same duties?
The closest I can think of, Brian, is if coaching position that it's in the collective bargaining agreement for teachers, but maybe no teacher wants to do it, then a classified person could do it. But that's not, I don't know if that's exactly what you're talking about.
Okay, it sounds to me like adding it might add a little bit too much, and maybe keeping it, keeping the policy as is, a little more general, might be the way to go.
Okay.
Is there any concern about that? Okay, we're going to go ahead and keep that as is. Policy 4419, group health plan. We currently have the very first paragraph in ours: the Board of Education shall have discretion to establish and maintain group health plans for the benefit of, and also the next sentence, we don't have option 1 or option 2 in our current policy. We just have that first small paragraph. I prefer in this situation to keep it as flexible as possible, to give the future boards and future administration as much leeway as they can have. So I prefer you guys not have to deal with boundaries set up by the policy when it comes to insurance coverage and health plans. Is there any concern about not adding the extra parts and just keeping it as is? Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and keep that one as is. Policy 4421.01, group insurance. All right. The board shall provide group insurance for the classified staff to participate in accordance with statute. Participation in this plan, we add the words in our current policy, may be optional, mandatory, or determined by the board. And we do not include the last sentence that is in this draft: the board shall pay X percentage of the, or X amount of the premium cost for such insurance. We do not have that sentence in there. I'm inclined to want to keep the flexibility in there and not change anything with from our current policy. Is there any concern about not changing anything? Okay, we'll keep that one as is. Policy 5111.01, homeless students. It is exact, I know it is 4 pages or 5, and it is exactly the same as active. One thing that I do want to mention, and we'll probably, I will recommend that we just keep it as is. But as a side note, Steve, I think we may want to consider what we're doing with homeless students in regards to remote learning.
Yes. And in regard to, you know, having connectivity and the things they're going to need to log on. I know Jeff worked to get some hotspots, but yeah, we need to definitely, be ready for that.
So I think one thing we should do is maybe when you are developing that remote learning policy administration guidelines, that you address what the plans are for how to work with homeless students and other students
On connect, yes,
situations.
yes.
So we'll keep this policy as is my recommendation. Is there any concern about doing that? All right, we'll keep that as is, and we'll add that portion of the discussion into the remote learning project. Next one is policy 5630.01, positive behavior intervention and support and limited use of restraint and seclusion. This is PBIS and restraint and seclusion. Here. There are certain sentences and statements, for the most part, it's very similar. There are certain statements when you get down to the second paragraph and on the Neola one with the draft, and it's the second paragraph with the section that starts, but only when there's immediate risk of physical harm to the student and or others, there is no other safe and effective intervention possibly. So this is in regards to you physically restraining and or secluding a student being permitted to. And we don't have the language in our active that says only when there is immediate risk of physical harm to the student and or others and other safe. So we do not have that language there. What we do have instead is on the third paragraph of our current one, the paragraph that begins, all restraint and seclusion shall be done in accordance with this policy, which is based on the standards. That last section that begins, and consistent with the Ohio Department of Education's policy on PBIS and restraint and seclusion, we have that language in our active, but it's not in the draft. So it seems to give more flexibility to adhere with what the ODE is going to recommend regarding seclusion and restraint, rather than defining for ourselves when it's appropriate.
I mean, is this one of those ones where we should talk to Sue or, about whether and get some opinion about which direction we should go here?
Yeah, we can do that. I believe Kimberly did talk to her, but I want to make sure that she's okay because this seems a little strange. So we will do that.
Okay.
So Matt, I would table this one because this is really important and I want to make sure we're getting it right.
I completely agree. We'll go ahead and table that one, and we'll get some feedback from Sue to which direction, what kind of language would be most appropriate. Okay, policy 6621, the change fund. There are no different.
There is one
Oh, did I miss one?
word change.
There's one word change on this one?
Yeah, if you look at the second sentence where it says designated building cashier as compared to designated cashiers.
Oh. Okay, yeah, you're right. Good catch.
I would tend to keep the current policy.
So designated cashiers rather than having to appoint building cashiers.
Yes.
Okay.
There could be more than one in a building.
I see. Okay. Are there any buildings without a cashier in them?
Not certain.
Clark
Okay.
Hall, that's about it. I mean, all our school buildings have them.
Okay. And do you guys, just as a side note, do you keep a running list as far as who the designated cashiers are? They have separate duties or additional duties for this work?
They would have, yes.
Okay. All right. So Mike, you're recommending keep the language in our current one.
Yes.
Okay. Are there any concerns from anybody else about keeping it as is? All right, we'll go ahead and do that. Policy 6660, School Service Fund. This one does have some changes also. Specifically, in our current one, we use the language in the very first sentence, after the establishment of a school fund, we add the language for the financial administration of the building's administration fund and the teacher's fund. I think that's what I have here.
Yep.
In the second paragraph on the draft from Neola, Neola adds the books of account will record income and expenses separately for each approved activity. That we don't currently have that in our active, nor do we have paragraph 3 or 4 from the draft about procedures shall be established for the daily deposit of monies collected, and all payments for supplies, equipment, and services will be made in accordance with established purchasing procedures of the district. Mike, do you think do you recommend any changes?
I don't see any problem in adopting the new policy. It just adds more clarity, and it's probably more consistent with other policies related to collection of funds, deposits, etc. Even though it's not spelled out in the current policy, it would still follow the same guidelines. So as money is collected, it needs to be deposited with the treasurer's office within a specified period of time. We would make the deposits and, record those as part of the fund to which they belong. So I don't see any harm in adopting the new policy.
Okay. Any other concerns or comments on this? All right, Mike, we'll go ahead and adopt the new policy language. Okay, policy 6670, the Trust and Agency Fund. Again, it's very similar to our current one. The treasurer is the one responsible for the administration of the Trust and Agency Fund. The very last sentence, the books of account will record income and expenses separately for each approved area, is not in our current active. Mike, did you want to go ahead and add that sentence?
That's not a problem. Yes, that's okay.
Okay. Are there any other comments or concerns regarding the Trust and Agency Fund policy? Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and adopt the new one. Policy 7430, Risk Reduction Program. There's only 2 differences on this one. In the second paragraph, in the last sentence of the second paragraph, after the word facilities of the district, our current one says in accordance with the federal OSHA standards adopted by the state. This draft from Neola does not have the reference to OSHA. Additionally, the draft proposes or gives us an option to that last sentence. In the event an inspection is made by a representative of the state The superintendent shall report the results thereof to the board at the meeting following the receipt of the state report. That sentence is not in our current policy. Is there any concern about keeping our policy as is and not adding that last sentence? Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and keep our policy as is. Policy 7460. Conservation of natural and material resources. It's awfully different, but thankfully it's a small one. It's a short one. The Neola draft starts out the increasing costs of natural energy resources coupled with the growing need to inhibit pollution mandate. The district implements strategies which will, and we choose either, will conserve all forms of energy used or ensure proper recycling of reusable materials. And it's basically directing the superintendent to develop immediate long-term plans to meet these concerns. Our current policy is basically directing the superintendent to, or mandate the board develop and implement plans to conserve all forms of energy used in the schools. So basically, conservation. And the board directs the superintendent to develop and implement both immediate and long-range plans to conserve energy resources. There is no revised code section referenced here.
So I think we just leave it. I think this would be a great project. I think this would be a fantastic, leaving it a little bit more open-ended. I feel like Neola just gives us two choices and it's like, recycle and conserve energy, which I'm not sure what they mean. I would love to see some student take on a project of developing a environmental sustainability plan for the district and present that to the board and something that we can adopt in a more formal way. It's, I think, something that I don't know. I just like to see them and I'd like to see them have the flexibility to do that. I think it'd be a really, really cool project.
I agree, Jennifer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I agree with keeping it broad also. Additionally, I wouldn't want to direct the superintendent or the future boards to get with too specific instructions. I don't want to run into a situation where we're putting solar panels out where we shouldn't be, and then kind of having to deal with the headache afterwards for little to no payoff. So I think we want to keep it broad because the science of conservation is always changing, and I think we need to have our policy flexible enough to adapt to those changes as they arise. So I think we'll go ahead and keep as is. Is there any other questions or concerns? All right. Moving on to policy 8220.01, the high school announcement sign. This is a unique policy to us. We can change the language in the policy if we want. We could leave it as is. As someone who drives past that sign all the time, I have not once seen the sign used improperly. It does lay out the priorities of the sign as far as primary priority, secondary, and tertiary. And it also includes that the sign is not for the indiscriminate use of the general public.
Steve, has there been a sign problem?
Never seen one. It's usually very positive and upbeat. And, I think the only thing I could see is, there's times when we've thanked local businesses for their support, but I don't think that's problematic. I mean, they've made donations or done some special things, and I think that's good recognition. So, and then most of it's just student recognition and,
Yep.
Maybe advertising events, those sorts of things.
I agree. I'd say the policy is working as intended. Are there any other concerns about not changing policy and keeping it as is? All right. We'll go ahead and keep it as is. And we'll keep it in force so that there is no question about how we can or should use the sign. I think it's a good idea to keep it as a unique policy for us. All right, we are to the part of the agenda where we discuss face coverings, guidance, and form. Steve, do you want to go ahead and handle this conversation?
Yeah, so I think the key part of this is the grade levels. We have been directed by council to and public health officials that we need a face covering policy and guidelines. And so I think the requirements, I think the crux of the issue is the age level of students. So there's a choice on page 3, the green highlighted part. It gives us discretion and flexibility. And, the state guideline is kindergarten through 2nd grade, maybe don't need to wear a mask, but we've been saying that we want kindergarten through 12 to wear a mask and not in preschool, and perhaps preschool will have shields. I think it's important that we protect students and staff, and I know that it's going to be hard in kindergarten, but our principals have plans to kind of make it just a part of the culture of the building and what we do, and to protect one another. And so I think on a case-by-case basis, there'll be some situations where students won't be able to do it because they have maybe they have a disability, or and we'll work with those on a case-by-case basis. But as we've all kind of witnessed in the mask coverings can stop a lot of things, the spread of the virus, and we think it's important. So I think that's the crux of it. I think there's a lot of other things in here. Any questions about that? So our idea is to have it K-12 and not preschool. So I think we need to have guidelines that reflect that. That's our recommendation.
So I don't have any question about the substance of the guidelines. My only question is in what the plan is to communicate those, because I think, there was some very generic language that has gone out so far. And I think that it'll be really important that people understand the specifics of the requirements, and so that would be my only question, is how you plan to communicate it.
So the plan to communicate it is to principals, or we've talked in our meetings, we had another one today. We didn't talk about this today, but we've talked about doing videos, modeling how to wear a mask, how important it is, and really kind of building a culture around that are necessary for our protection. We protect ourselves, we protect one another. And I think at the K-5 level, that's going to be really important. And that's really part of the plan is to, do it before school starts on the 24th and ask parents to practice with kids. And I know they're already doing that, but being very, just trying to build a lot of energy around wearing a mask. And I know it's not going to be easy. It's just another really tough thing that we have to, we have to kind of do. I mean, we just to make sure everybody's safe.
Hey, Steve, I was talking to my sister's a teacher in Maryland and stuff, and she was saying that some of the teachers, what they were doing for the younger kids was allowing them to design their own mask.
Yeah.
And got them excited about the whole process because it could be Superman or whatever
Mhm.
their likes are. They were able to design their mask, and that's what kind of some of the approaches some of the teachers where she's teaching down in Maryland that they're using. So that might be something that our teachers can maybe incorporate with everything else they're doing.
Right. Yeah, that has come up in our discussions as well, Brian. But I think it's going to be particularly challenging in the younger grades.
Steve, the second paragraph
On page 1.
on page 1,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's page 1. Yeah, it itemizes adults. Am I?
Yeah, I meant to ask that too. I had the same question. Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, we need to change that and make sure that it's K-12
and adults.
Mm-hmm. And adults.
Right.
And our teachers are on board with wearing masks, and they really want all kids to have masks. We've had discussion about, younger kids, but I think it just, for everyone's safety, it's important. There is some research about transmission rates of younger kids that, I've read that the transmission rate isn't as high, but those studies are there's not very many of them yet, and they've been the data really is coming from Europe, where they have been back to school already. Since we've been closed, there hasn't been really studies here on transmission rates, and so the notion that younger kids can't spread it is still an open question, and I think the data is not it's not a solved kind of question yet. And so I think there was an article in the New York Times about it today, about the lack of studies. So we just want to make sure everybody's safe, and we want to, certainly provide grace to kids that aren't, that need a little bit of help. But at the end of the day, we really want to make this a part of our culture.
Steve, how much tolerance are we building into this these recommendations, as far as a kindergarten, first, second grader decides they've had enough, they don't want it on their face anymore, they're going to throw a fit and they're going to refuse to do it?
So we've talked to Franklin County Public Health about mask breaks and trying to work with kids if they're 6 feet in a desk away from their peers, having a mask break. Other districts are doing something similar. And so we want to build in some reprieve throughout the day. But certainly if kids are up walking around, we want them to have a mask on. But if they're sitting at their desk, most of the time they'll have their mask on, but we want to build in breaks. Depending on what kind of mask you have, they can be hot. We've also purchased some lightweight surgical masks that are not as hot as some of the cloth masks. And we have some for kids, and we've purchased some for adults. So, I think we're gonna work on a case by case basis with parents. But we also want to make, case by case if there's an issue. But we also want to make sure that it's in our handbook, that it's just a part of our code and our rules.
Okay. Any other comments or questions regarding face coverings? Okay. Any other comments regarding the policy and governance meeting? All right, very good. It's 8:04 and we're adjourning this meeting, policy and governance, and I'll hand it off to Burl for the next meeting.
So Burl, I've texted Steve Farnsworth. Oh,
No, I'm here. I'm just
okay.
fumbling to unmute myself
Just-
and find the agenda.
Yeah, so I'm gonna text him and tell him we're ready, and then that we, in your calendar should be the other Zoom link.
Yeah, we have to call this meeting to order. I'm just trying to find where I put the agenda. I don't see it, but so you're going to get a hold of Steve while we, okay, so let's call the special meeting to order. I think I have 8:05 p.m. Mr. Verlingo, can you call the roll?
Unmute. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, if you're calling, I
Okay.
can't hear it.
Okay. Mr. Campbell,
Here.
Ms. Chrysler,
Here.
Mr. Hairston,
Yes, here.
Ms. Mooring,
Here.
and Ms. Pickle Antonio.
Here. That gave me time to find the agenda. Is there a motion that we go into executive session pursuant to Ohio Revised Code 121.22G1?
I'll
So
move.
Sorry.
I'll
Mr.
second.
Campbell and a second by Ms. Mooring.
Yes.
Any discussion? I will just add that if there's anyone who is out there watching the live stream, we are going to go into executive session. We will be coming back into this YouTube live that you're watching, but we will not be taking any board action after executive session except to adjourn the meeting. So you are more than welcome to continue watching the live feed. At some point we will be back, but the only thing that we'll be doing when we get back is adjourning the meeting. It is 8:06 p.m. Oh, you need to call the roll, Mr.
8:07.
Verlingo, sorry.
Okay, Ms. Pickle Antonio,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Ms. Chrysler,
Yes.
Mr. Hairston,
Yes.
Ms. Mooring.
Yes.
So it's 8:07 p.m. now.
8:07.
And we're in executive session. Does everybody have the link to the executive session meeting?
I do not, but I am not part of that. So
Okay. Oh, that's right. So
I will
Mr.
just excuse
Verlingo,
myself at
okay,
this point.
do you need me to let you know when the time that we adjourn?
Yes.
Okay, I will let you know that, and I'll let you know who made the motion.
Okay.
Okay,
All right. Thank you.
thanks.